Right. Testing, testing. Yeah, so I watched Dune Prophecy, and yeah, I do agree with that it was kind of weird that in 10,000 years, their technology hasn't evolved just, if not even one bit. But in the show, one thing is clear: thinking machines are bad because they tried to kill all of humanity. This idea transitions from science fiction to our real world without being lost in translation. But AI is kind of an umbrella term. And what we have today has almost nothing to do with what exists in fiction. I hear Sam Altman and Dario Amodei being AI doomers, yet they have no problem developing a and profiting from this technology. But I can't help but ask the question, why is everyone supposed to die if machines can think? If you're only listening to spokespeople for AI companies, you'll have a skewed view of how AI is actually being integrated into the workspace. You probably don't need to convince any developer to include it in their workflow, but you also can't dictate how they do so. Whenever I sit next to another developer during pair programming, I can't help but feel frustrated and annoyed by their setup. But I don't complain because they would also be just as annoyed with mine. The beauty of dev work is that all that doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is the output. If you use a boilerplate generator like Create React App, very few people will complain. If you use AI to generate the same code, as long as it works, no one will complain either. If the code is handcrafted, as they say, with using your brain matter, no one will be the wiser. Developers will use any tool at their disposal to increase their own productivity. That's normal. But what happens when that $1,000 per developer per month subscription starts to feel expensive? What happens when managers expect a tenfold return on investment? That's what was marketed. Yet the sprint velocity doesn't increase. It doesn't budge at all. On one end, we have new metrics. Those are created to track developers' use of the tool, which in my experience are highly inaccurate and they vary widely. On the other hand, companies are using AI as justification for laying off workers. So, which metric is to be trusted? AI isn't a solution in search of a problem. There's quite some useful things you can do with it. One person will tell you that they use it for writing tests and that is great at it. Another will praise it for, using it to write utility functions. Another one will use it to better understand the requirements. Each of those are valid use cases. But the question managers keep asking is, can we use AI instead of hiring another developer? Which, no, we'll get back to that. I'm not sure what is supposed to happen if we achieve so-called AGI. Does that mean I no longer have to do code reviews? Is it AGI when AI stops hallucinating? My shower thought answer for that is AGI is just an AI that can say, I don't know, when it doesn't know the answer. Maybe that will mean it's actually thinking. But I don't think Sam Altman sees that as a selling point. Why are we supposed to die if a machine can think? Every time someone uses this argument, I think of Thanos, in the Avengers. In the Avengers saga, Thanos kills half of all human or living beings in the universe. It's an act so total, so irreversible that the writers had to bend time itself to undo it. And still, 15 movies later, the franchise keeps going, and each new villain has to threaten something, but nothing lands the same. You already saw the worst. We killed half of the living beings in the universe. So now the scale is broken. You watch another movie and they say the villain is a terrorist from an unnamed country. You're like, give me a break. But that's what AI extinction narrative has done to the conversation around AI. By opening with the end of the world, it made every practical concern feels small in comparison. Who wants to talk about sprint velocity and hallucinated functions when we are supposed to be staring down the barrel of an existential threat? So we don't. We argue about the apocalypse instead. Meanwhile, on a weekend at 2 a.m., I still have to debug code in production. And that code has never once tried to kill me, but it will ruin my weekend for sure. The reality is quite different from the drama that unfolds online. The longer this AI craze continues, the less I believe we're headed towards a dramatic bubble pop. Instead, I think the major players will try to bully their way out of this one, and that bullying is already happening, at least in three fronts, through language, narrative, and money. Microsoft is leading the way when it comes to language crackdown. They're rounding up critics in their own Copilot Discord servers, banning any users who use the now deemed derogatory term microslop. I probably need to beep that for the video. And NVIDIA is also publicly telling people to stop using the phrase AI slop. These aren't isolated incidents of corporate thin skin. They are coordinated attempts to police the vocabulary we use to criticize the technology. Control the language, and you go a long way towards controlling the conversation. When you can't call a thing what it is, it becomes harder to argue that the things exist at all. On the narrative front, we are told that AI is good, it's innovative, it's inevitable. Then we're told it's going to take all our jobs. And at the same time, we're told it's an existential threat that could wipe us off the planet. It is simultaneously the best thing that could ever happen to humanity and the worst. It reminds me of the whole thing of war is peace, freedom is slavery, and ignorance is strength, the way George Orwell puts it. It's a cognitive trap, basically. When a technology is framed as both the savior and the apocalypse, the question regular people ask as seen are mundane. We can't ask things like, does it work? Is it worth the cost? Or are we actually benefiting from this? Instead, we spend our time and energy worrying about the end of the world. And companies keep burning through cash while the narrative burns through our attention. And the last front is money. We all witnessed firsthand with the fiasco involving Anthropic and OpenAI and the Department of Defense or War, however you call it. People were quick to sort players into the good guys, the bad guys, and the ugly. But to me, it looked like a dispute designed to obscure the problem that has plagued AI companies from the very beginning. They need to make money. It doesn't matter if a company generates $20 billion a year when its operating costs doubles annually. They're still in the red. Anthropic was making this grand stand, positioning itself as the principled actor fighting against the US war machine. At the same time, they had no issue working with Palantir, a company that makes no secret of its commitment to mass surveillance and its role in powering the war machine. Meanwhile, OpenAI is struggling with its own financial stability. Sora is dead. They've launched ads on their platform, something that Sam Altman once described as very last resort. When you are in the red and the customers are willing to pay, principles take a secondary role. They're a luxury that you can do without. Given OpenAI's history of bending copyright law and converting to a for-profit entity, it's naive to assume there are other principles they wouldn't bend as well. They quickly jumped into the DoD deal, scooping up a cool $200 million contract. There was one detail, though, in Anthropic's statement that deserves more attention than it got. They said something like, we support the use of AI for lawful foreign intelligence and counterintelligence missions, but using these systems for mass domestic surveillance is incompatible with democratic values. I thought about that for a second, because in other words, they're saying surveilling citizens is immoral. If you're not a citizen or if you're a foreigner, you are on your own. So right now, AI companies are bleeding money, policing the words we use to criticize them. They are manufacturing existential dread to crowd out any skepticism, and they are taking defense contracts while performing ethical restraint. And somewhere in the middle of this, we are supposed to believe that only they can save us. When you're losing money, but need to maintain the illusion of infinite growth, you don't wait for the market to correct you. You make the bubble burst feel like it's not just unlikely, but it's unthinkable. You bully the language, inflate the stakes, and monetize the fear. As individuals, what are we supposed to do with the useful part of this technology? It helps me write tests. It helps my colleagues parse requirements. Used without hype and within realistic expectation is actually pretty good. But a good tool doesn't justify the valuations they lay off as euphemism, the defense contracts, or the Discord bans. It doesn't sustain that mythology that has been built around it. The gap between the tool that exists and the revolution that was promised is exactly what bullying is designed to keep you from looking into too closely. I still struggle to answer managers who ask me to justify the team's use of the tool. I never had to justify my use of an IDE before, or my secret love affair with Tmux. For now, all I can tell is it's useful within limits, and that should be enough. It won't be what they want to hear, but it's more than the industry has managed to say about itself. Why is everyone supposed to die if machines can think? They're not. That's the point. That extinction narrative is a distraction, a way to avoid answering the mundane questions. Does it work? Is it worth the cost? Are we actually benefiting from this? Those are the questions that matter. The apocalypse sells, but the reality is much more boring. And maybe that's what they're afraid of. That we'll realize it's just another tool, useful, but not revolutionary. That's the real threat. Not to humanity, but to the hype. That's it. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.